this weekend. I'm Bill Hayes, hoping you are having yourself a great weekend. At least it's a little summer-like. It hasn't been throughout most of this month and last month, and whatever. That's another issue. Joining me now is Rick Batika, associate with the Shulman law firm. And Rick, thanks for taking the time.
Hi, Bill. Thank you for having me.
I want to talk to you about something that, a lot of people don't talk about. And I guess it's something that when it's brought top of mind, maybe they should be looking at this a little bit more. Divorce, of course, is something that is real. It happens in our society, maybe a lot more than people would like. And it does have some fairly significant implications as you get older, especially with things like pensions. What is the law when it comes to pensions and divorced couples?
Well, generally speaking, though, the law under the Family Law Act is that pensions, among with other assets, are equalized or equally divided as of the date of separation. So they come into the valuation of determining someone's net worth, or the legal term is net family property.
Okay, so do you have to, as a lawyer, or is there somebody else who will actually look over this situation?
So generally, with pensions, the pension administrator, depending on the type of pension, and depending on if it's a federal pension versus a provincial pension, the pension administrator would be in a position to do the pension evaluation. With some pensions that fall out of the general scheme, the parties may have to retain an actuary to actually conduct the pension valuation.
How often you deal with family law, and so you see divorced couples quite frequently? Are we seeing more people divorcing later in life? As a matter of fact, one of the things that people do believe is that, once you get that empty nest, people start realizing, well, we don't have anything to keep ourselves together anymore. So, it's time to look for greener pastures, as it were. Is that, in fact, a reality, or is that more an old wives' tale?
No, it's not. It's actually a reality, and believe it or not, I think the term in the media has been the great divorces, and the rise of those divorces in Canada over the last 10 to 20 years has been phenomenal. And we're finding here, at least at Shulman Law Firm, a lot more than it used to be. People later on in their life wanting a divorce. And part of that, you have to consider what the financial implications are on those people depending on their ages.
Is it significantly different pension-wise? Because we're now dealing with most of those people, I would think, say 55 and over, who are nearing retirement or are retired and getting those divorces. Are we dealing with two pensions in a lot of cases, or is it still there's the breadwinner, and then whoever else is there?
No, actually, it's more common now to have two pensions.
Right.
Given that over the last 30, 40 years, women have dramatically made an impact, but in the workforce, and a lot of times their pensions surpass those of their male spouses. So. Generally speaking, it's usually two pensions.
Where are we in terms of people who cohabitated for years, but never did get married? How does that change the pension situation?
Actually, it applies to those people as well, to common law as well. It's not just the pension valuation. It's possible, depending on the type of pension, it's possible to divide a pension for a common law person as well. So, if we're only talking about pensions, that is.
What about when couples get into that situation, when they're deciding that they're going to go their separate ways? What's the financial cost of divorce as far as that goes? Legal fees, the division of properties and assets, and let's face it, in this day and age, it can be quite the thing you're trying to unravel, I guess.
This process is really driven by the parties and their behavior to one another. So, and I always say it to a lot of clients or even people coming in for a consultation. Everybody hears the horror stories of a very bitter, expensive divorce. But nobody ever talks about the divorces or the separations that people resolve amicably. And they tend to be usually on the larger number side. Everyone usually hears about the lower percentage.
Right.
How people behave against themselves and how reasonable or unreasonable they are, if they can accept that the relationship is over, they can keep a check on their emotions and try to be reasonable with the other person. Generally, divorces aren't very expensive at all. It can range typically somewhere between $35,000 to $5,000 altogether, or it could exceed that, or it could be lower than that. So it really depends, though.
Now, there's a report from the Canadian Institute for Health Information that Canada's seniors population is going to grow by 68% over the next 20 years. And that might be low, quite frankly, with the way that medicine is working these days. And that will cause greater demands in the continuing care sector in the country. If you are a part of a couple now or getting divorced, how should that impact your economic thinking going forward?
And that's a good question, though, Bill, because what we often find here at Shulman Law Firm is that people who are getting divorced and later on in their years, they have a tougher time bouncing back, or the resilience from a financial perspective, especially if at the end of the day they're finding themselves in more debt than prior to the separation, because now that they're leaving the marriage and they're either responsible to pay their spouse something or they haven't saved enough, they may find themselves to be in a larger amount of debt than they previously were. So.
And they have to, obviously, if they're living longer, they've got to be able to, spread that money over a longer period of time.
That's correct. And keep in mind, they're in their retirement years. It may be difficult for them to find a job or go back into the workplace if they had to. So there's a lot of factors here. And the effect on their finances could be detrimental.
One other thing, Rick, as far as that goes, of course, an awful lot of people have been married more than once. They've been through this process a couple of times. How does that impact? I mean, does it become more difficult if you're on your second or third or maybe fourth divorce?
It can be, because if you have obligations resulting from the previous separation, the fact that you're going through another separation and or divorce is basically assuming more obligation if there are going to be some.
Yeah, you're cutting the pie, thinner and thinner every time.
Exactly. So yes, I mean, there's only going to be so much to go around at the end of the day.
Yeah, that might have some impact on some people, I should think. Rick, thanks an awful lot for this. Rick Patika, associate lawyer for Shulman Law Firm, and if you are in that situation, a lot of interesting stuff to keep in mind going forward. That number, 68% over the next 20 years, the senior population growing, and like I say, I think that's pretty low. Rick, thanks for this. Take care. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you, Bill. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Got a text, 71010. From Orangeville. I think this is pretty funny. I think that divorces should be free and marriage licenses should cost $25,000. I like that. Well, maybe that's a little out of your budget. Speaking of budgets, you got a summer budget? Wade Stazer will tell you how to get one going. That's coming up next. The months are away. I'm Bill Hayes.
It's July at Ready Power Sports in Mississauga. Introducing Air Miles Reward Miles on all your purchases right now at Ready Power Sports. On motorcycles, lawnmowers, generators, ATVs, snowblowers, jet skis, water pumps, and outboard motors. Ready Power Sports is the only factory authorized dealer. It's 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 the only factory authorized